All right, so today we're going to be diving deep into, well, cults and new religious movements. It's a fascinating topic, but kind of unnerving too, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's one of those areas where things aren't always what they seem.
Hmm.
What starts as a search for meaning can sometimes take a darker turn.
Definitely. We've got some academic papers here, about cult characteristics. And also, we've got these online forum discussions for people who used to be members of a specific group. And we also have some background information about the group's leader, like about him and his business ventures.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, think of it this way. This deep dive that we're doing is it's like a crash course in critical thinking, right? We want to equip you, the listener, with the tools to evaluate groups and their teachings, and we're going to use these sources, all these different sources, to kind of highlight potential red flags, because the big question is, can, like, positive qualities, like a focus on spiritual development or having a strong community, can these things actually mask harmful dynamics?
That's the question we're going to be exploring today. And just to clarify right off the bat, the word cult, is often a very loaded term, and it's usually used pretty negatively. So we're going to be using a more neutral term in this deep dive, which is new religious movement, or we can just call it NRM.
NRMs. Okay, got it. So NRMs new,
Now,
but our expert source makes it clear, right, that new doesn't mean harmless. Some new religious movements, they show characteristics that could be harmful to individuals or even to society as a whole.
absolutely. And that's the kind of tightrope that we're going to be walking today. Recognizing that not every new group is a problem, but also, being aware of the potential for harm.
So how do we even begin to assess a group? Where do we even start? This PDF, this cults and deteriorated spiritual systems, that you sent over. It seems like a good place to start, to be honest. It lays out some warning signs to watch out for.
Yeah, let's start there. Let's start with those warning signs. One that often really stands out is the what they call the fossilization of teachings. The source describes, how original teachings can lose their spirit. They can become rigid and ritualistic.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, they stop teachings stop being about understanding, genuine understanding and growth, and they become more about control.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If a group, any group, is discouraging questioning and independent thinking about anything, that's a big red flag.
So a healthy group then, a healthy group would encourage critical thinking, it sounds like. And it's not just about blindly following.
Precisely. Which brings us to another warning sign, which is what they call exalting the teacher. This is where, a group leader's interpretation of whatever it is of their teaching is seen as absolute truth.
And if you look at, we were talking about those forum posts earlier about Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation. We can just call that CEF for short. A lot of people are saying that Butler's authority was practically unquestionable, and that anyone who disagreed with him was ostracized or even silenced.
Yeah, and that silencing, if true, really highlights the danger here. If you can't question or challenge a leader's views, that's a major problem.
Definitely. And that ties into another one of those red flags from that PDF from cults, which is confusing external behavior with spiritual attainment.
That's a crucial one. The PDF actually uses yoga as an example, that yoga postures, were designed originally for one specific purpose, but now they're often promoted as a kind of a cure-all without any context, proper context.
Oh, I see. So, like, just because somebody, looks the part, they dress a certain way, they follow strict rules, they do all the right rituals, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've actually, reached some kind of high level of spiritual awareness.
Exactly. You have to look. You have to look beyond the surface. You have to, and consider the potential for hypocrisy or even inner struggles.
Yeah.
Like, are the group's actions really aligning with their values?
Which brings us to the next warning sign in that PDF, the misuse and fragmentation of teachings. This is where concepts are taken out of context or just oversimplified.
And the PDF, it specifically warns against falling for these one-size-fits-all solutions, on the spiritual path. You were mentioning earlier those SEF forum posts.
Yeah,
Maybe that'd be a
okay.
good time to unpack those a bit. Starting with a closer look at Chris Butler and this ATH itself, the Science of Identity Foundation. These forum posts, they offer really valuable insights, I think, into the group's dynamics. But we need to be fair here and acknowledge that these are allegations from former members, right? These aren't proven facts.
Got it. we're not presenting these as like gospel truth, but they do offer a perspective that I think is really important to consider. So what are some of the key claims that are coming out from these ex-members?
Well, several of them claim that Butler actually abandoned traditional sannyasa vows, which, in Hinduism involve renouncing worldly possessions
Hmm.
and dedicating yourself to spiritual study and to celibacy. But he allegedly continued to amass wealth and position himself as, a guru, a spiritual teacher.
Wow, that seems like a pretty big contradiction.
It is, and it's one of the major points of contention for a lot of these former members. They see it as, a prime example of that dynamic that we talked about earlier, exalting the teacher.
I was struck by how many of the posts mention, this pressure to donate, to make large donations to SEF. And it seems like often at the expense of the members' own financial well-being.
Yeah, financial control is unfortunately a very common tactic
Mm.
in, potentially harmful groups. And as you pointed out, many of these posts highlight the alleged suppression of information within SEF, and particularly, the teachings related to what they call Guru Tattva.
Can you explain what that is? Gutatva, I'm not familiar with that term.
Sure. Essentially, it refers to the concept of a genuine spiritual master, like what qualities they possess, their role, how to recognize them. It's a very core principle in traditional Hinduism.
So by restricting access to those specific teachings, was Butler, was he potentially trying to prevent people from, critically evaluating his own position as a guru?
That's the implication. Yeah. Without a full understanding of Guru Tattva, followers might be more susceptible to manipulation or undue influence.
Okay, I see. So it's like he like removed the measuring stick almost to make it harder for his followers to actually question his authority, especially with those allegations about, abandoning the sannyasa vows, which, if you could just remind us, what do those vows actually entail?
Sure. So in traditional Hinduism, sannyasa vows are a very, very serious commitment. And they involve renouncing your worldly possessions and dedicating your life to spiritual study and service and celibacy. And the allegations against Butler suggest a real disconnect between what he was preaching and how he was living.
Yeah, okay, right. So controlling information, coupled with a potential lack of adherence to traditional vows, that sounds like a recipe for problems.
It is, and it reinforces why it's so important to do our own research and not just
Right.
rely on what one group or one leader tells us. Right? We need to seek out diverse perspectives,
Yeah.
and be wary of anyone who discourages us from questioning or thinking independently.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit here and go back to this whole QNet situation. The source mentions that QNet was accused of being of operating as what they call a pyramid scheme. For those who might not know what that is, can you break down what a pyramid scheme is and how it connects to what we're talking about today about potential cult dynamics?
Yeah. So a pyramid scheme, it's basically a business model where participants, they make money primarily by recruiting new members rather than actually selling real products or services.
Mm.
The focus is on getting people to buy into the system with this promise of wealth and success.
So it's less about a legitimate product and more about just getting people to buy into this idea, this dream of getting rich quickly.
Exactly. And that's where, the parallels to cult dynamics really come in. Pyramid schemes, they often prey on vulnerable individuals,
Right.
and they promise them things like community purpose and financial abundance, much like, some potentially harmful groups.
Okay, I see. I'm seeing the connection now. They both create a compelling narrative, right? Often led by, these very charismatic figures, and it's fueled by these testimonials from people who claim to have achieved great things within the system.
Exactly. And as you mentioned earlier, that need for belonging and connection is it's a very powerful human drive.
Yeah.
And it can be manipulated. And the sad reality is that in most pyramid schemes, only those at the very top actually make a profit, while the vast majority of participants, they actually end up losing money.
That's heartbreaking, honestly. So if we bring this back to Seth, the accusations about financial pressure and these blurred lines between spiritual activities and business activities, it all starts to make more sense now. It's almost like there's this double layer of potential exploitation, one disguised as spirituality and the other disguised as a business opportunity.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. That's why it's so crucial to be very, very discerning, you know?
Mm.
And question who's actually benefiting from any system.
Yeah.
And at what cost, right? Whether it's a spiritual group or a business or even a political movement, look beyond the surface. Critically evaluate those underlying structures and those power dynamics at play.
We've got to be careful out there, man. These systems of exploitation that can be really sophisticated.
They can be. But the good news is, awareness is a powerful antidote. By understanding these dynamics, we can protect ourselves and we can protect others from harm.
Yeah, it's empowering to know that we have the ability to spot these red flags and make informed choices, to protect ourselves.
It absolutely is. And remember the fact that these ex-members are speaking out is incredibly brave.
Mm.
Their voices provide a crucial counter-narrative to the official pronouncements from the group.
Yeah, it's like they're offering us a glimpse behind the curtain and
Yeah.
showing us that even groups that start with good intentions, seemingly good intentions, they can be manipulated and used for harmful purposes.
Exactly. Their stories remind us to approach all groups and all ideologies with a healthy dose of skepticism,
Mm.
to question our assumptions and to really value independent thinking.
It all comes back to that critical thinking, that we talked about at the beginning. So before we move on, let's recap some of the key takeaways for our listeners so far. What are some of the most important things to keep in mind when evaluating a group or an ideology?
Well, first and foremost, remember that these warning signs, they aren't always obvious. They can be very subtle, disguised as positive qualities,
Mm.
or they're justified using spiritual or philosophical rhetoric.
So vigilance is key here, right?
Yeah.
We need to question our assumptions, do our own research, and not be afraid to challenge authority, even if it's coming from someone we respect or admire.
Exactly. And secondly, remember that spirituality itself is not inherently bad. It can be, a very powerful force for good in the world.
But like any powerful force, right, it can be misused, can be distorted. That's why it's crucial to approach spiritual teaching, spiritual practices, with a critical and discerning mind.
Absolutely. And never blindly follow a leader, no matter how charismatic or how convincing they seem.
Yeah, we have a responsibility to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And to protect others from potential harm. And that starts with developing our critical thinking skills, right? That's what we're doing here today.
We are. We're giving you the tools to question, to analyze, and to make informed decisions about the groups and ideologies that you encounter.
So far, we've delved into SIF's teachings, the complexities of this whole QNet connection, and the importance of critical thinking. But there's still more to explore here. Let's dive into that personal story from that IWAT titanium mission source, and see how these how these dynamics can impact individuals on a really personal level.
It's a powerful story that I think really brings these concepts to life.
All right, let's get into it. Join us for the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back. Last time we started unpacking some pretty serious warning signs of potentially harmful groups, and we took a preliminary look at the Science of Identity Foundation. We called it CEF, and we kind of used those warning signs as a lens.
Right. We explored those disturbing allegations from those ex-members about Chris Butler's leadership and the group's practices and that intriguing connection to QNet.
Yeah. It's a lot to process, I know, but our goal here, remember, is to give you the tools to critically evaluate, any group or ideology, not just this one, because let's be honest, these patterns of manipulation and control, they can pop up anywhere, not just in in religious contexts.
Absolutely, we see these dynamics in political movements, self-help groups,
Yeah.
even in online communities.
So let's keep digging into CIS for a little bit longer. One of the sources mentioned that Butler based his teachings on this philosophy of bhakti yoga, which is a path of devotion, I guess, within Hinduism. You're more familiar with this than I am. Can you give us a little background on what
Yeah.
that is?
So bhakti yoga, in its traditional form, it emphasizes love and surrender to a divine being, often Krishna. It's a beautiful path, a profound path.
But as we've seen, spiritual teachings can be misused, and that's That's where things get a little tricky with ESSA, because ex-members claim that that Butler, he presented this very specific and somewhat unorthodox interpretation of bhakti yoga, one that really emphasized his own role as a guru or spiritual master. And we talked about the alleged suppression of information within the group, particularly around those teachings on Guru Tattva. Without access to that information, it would be pretty hard, wouldn't it, for members to assess Butler's authority fairly?
Absolutely. Imagine, trying to judge a chef's skills, but you don't even know what good cooking is supposed to look like. Guru Tattva, in traditional Hinduism, it gives you the criteria for evaluating a genuine spiritual master.
Yeah.
It tells you, it outlines the qualities to look for, the behaviors to be wary of, and the guru's role in guiding disciples. Without that framework, it's very easy to be misled by charisma or claims of special knowledge.
So it's like he almost removed the measuring stick, right, to make it harder for his followers to question his authority, especially with those allegations that that he abandoned those traditional sannyasa vows. Can you remind us again what do those vows actually entail?
Sure. So in traditional Hinduism, sannyasa vows, they're a serious commitment. They involve renouncing all of your worldly possessions and dedicating your life to spiritual study and service and celibacy. And the allegations against Butler, they suggest this real disconnect between what he was preaching and how he was actually living his life.
Right. So controlling information coupled with that potential lack of adherence to traditional vows, that's a recipe for potential problems.
It is, and it reinforces why it's so important to do our own research. And not just rely on what one group or one leader tells us. Right. Seek out diverse perspectives, and be wary of anyone who discourages you from questioning or thinking independently.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and go back to this QNet situation. The source mentions that QNet was accused of operating as what they call a pyramid scheme. For those who might not be familiar with that term, can you break down what a pyramid scheme is and how it connects to our conversation today about potential cult dynamics?
Sure. So a pyramid scheme, it's essentially a business model where participants they make money primarily by recruiting new members rather than by selling actual products or services.
Oh,
The
yeah.
focus is on getting people to buy into the system with this promise of wealth and success.
So it's less about a legitimate product and more about getting people to buy into this dream of getting rich quickly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's where those parallels to cult dynamics really come in. Pyramid schemes, they often prey on vulnerable individuals. They promise them things like community and purpose and financial abundance,
Yeah.
much like some potentially harmful groups.
I see. I'm seeing the connection now. They both create, a compelling narrative, often led by, charismatic figures, and it's fueled by these testimonials from people who claim to have achieved, great things within the system.
Exactly, and as you mentioned earlier, that need for belonging and connection, that's a very, very powerful human drive, and it can be manipulated. And the sad reality is that in most pyramid schemes, only those at the very top actually profit, while the vast majority of participants end up actually losing money.
That's heartbreaking. So if we bring this back to SIF, those accusations about financial pressure and these blurred lines between, spiritual activities and business activities, it all starts to make more sense, doesn't it? It's almost like there's this double layer of potential exploitation. One disguised as spirituality, and the other disguised as a business opportunity.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's why it's so crucial to be discerning.
Yeah.
And question who's truly benefiting from any system, right?
Yeah.
And at what cost, whether it's a spiritual group or a business venture or even a political movement. Look beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Critically evaluate those underlying structures and those power dynamics at play.
Yeah, we gotta be careful out there. These systems of exploitation, they can be very sophisticated.
They can be, but the good news is that awareness is a powerful antidote.
Yeah.
By understanding these dynamics, we can protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can protect others from harm.
Yeah, it's empowering to know that we have the ability to spot these red flags
Yeah.
and to make make informed choices to protect ourselves.
It absolutely is. And remember, the fact that these ex-members are speaking out, it's incredibly brave. Their voices provide a crucial counter-narrative
Yeah.
to the official pronouncements of the group.
Yeah, they're offering us a glimpse behind the curtain, right? Showing us that even groups that start with seemingly good intentions, can be manipulated and used for harmful purposes.
Exactly. Their stories remind us to approach all groups and all ideologies with a healthy dose of skepticism, to question our assumptions, and to really value independent thinking.
It all comes back to critical thinking,
Yeah.
right? That we talked about at the beginning. So before we move on, let's recap some of the key takeaways for our listeners so far. What are the most important things to keep in mind when evaluating a group or an ideology?
Well, first and foremost, remember that warning signs, they aren't always obvious. They can be very subtle, disguised as positive qualities, or they can be justified using spiritual or philosophical rhetoric.
So vigilance is key here. We need to question our assumptions, do our own research, and not be afraid to challenge authority, even if it's coming from someone we respect or admire.
Precisely. And secondly, remember that spirituality itself isn't inherently bad. It can be a very powerful force for good in the world.
But like any powerful force, right? It can be misused. That's why it's so crucial to approach spiritual teachings and practices with a critical and discerning mind.
And never blindly follow a leader, no matter how charismatic or how convincing they may seem.
We have a responsibility to protect ourselves and
Uh,
to protect others from potential harm, and that starts with developing those critical thinking skills, right? That's what we're doing here today.
we are. We're giving you the tools to question, to
Yeah.
analyze, and to make informed decisions about the groups and the ideologies that you encounter in the world.
So far, we've delved into SIF's teachings, the complexities of this whole QNet connection, and the importance of critical thinking. But there's still more to explore here. Let's dive into that personal story from the Anya mission source and see how these dynamics can impact individuals on a personal level.
It's a powerful story, and I think it really brings these concepts to life.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. Join us for the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've been exploring the world of cults and new religious movements.
Right, using the Science of Identity Foundation and Chris Butler as our case study.
Exactly. We've unpacked warning signs, we analyzed teachings, grappled with those unsettling allegations from ex-members.
It's been intense,
Yeah.
but eye-opening.
Yeah, very eye-opening. So now I think it's time to kind of zoom out, consider the bigger picture. What can we learn from all this that goes beyond just Seth? How can we protect ourselves from manipulation and make more informed decisions about these sorts of things?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
The patterns that we see with SAF, charismatic leadership, information control, blurring of spirituality and business, these things, they're not limited to just, religious groups.
Right. It's like those dynamics can pop up anywhere, like political movements, self-help groups, even online communities where people are searching for connection and belonging.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to develop that critical lens, right?
Yeah.
To assess situations objectively, no matter how appealing the rhetoric is or how strong the emotional pull is.
It strikes me that warning from the PDF about confusing external behavior with spiritual attainment. It's really relevant here, I think. Just because a group or leader talks the talk, uses spiritual language, or promotes seemingly positive values,
Mm.
it doesn't automatically make them trustworthy.
Absolutely, yeah. We can't let appearances cloud our judgment.
Right.
We have to look deeper, examine those actions and those power dynamics, and look for the potential for exploitation.
Yeah, it's like that quote from the PDF, the ability to endure pain, to impress others, or to detach from ordinary connections with the world has little to do with enlightenment.
So true.
Yeah.
We can be seduced by charisma, by austerity, or by claims of spiritual power.
Right.
But those things alone don't guarantee authenticity or integrity.
So how do we avoid those traps then? What are some practical steps that we can take to protect ourselves?
Well, first and foremost,
Mm-hmm.
cultivate. Cultivate healthy skepticism,
Mm.
not cynicism, but a willingness to question, to seek diverse perspectives,
Right.
and not just accept things at face value.
Especially information coming from a single source, like a charismatic leader or a tightly controlled group.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Always cross-check information, look for those independent sources, and be wary of anyone who discourages you from doing your own research.
Okay, and what about our emotions? We talked about how these groups can exploit that human need for belonging and connection. How do we balance that desire with critical thinking?
That's a great question. It's natural to crave community and purpose,
Mhm. Yeah.
but we have to be aware of how those desires can be manipulated.
So it's not about becoming isolated or distrustful of everyone,
Right.
but rather finding that balance between our emotional needs and our critical thinking.
Exactly, yeah. Be aware of your own vulnerabilities, set healthy boundaries, and be willing to walk away from situations that feel off or exploitative, even if it means leaving a community that you care about.
Yeah, and it's so important to remember that we're not alone in this, right? There are resources available, organizations that are dedicated to helping people who have been harmed by cults or abusive groups.
Absolutely. If something feels wrong, don't hesitate to reach out for support, talk to trusted friends or family, or contact an organization specializing in cult recovery.
Okay, so before we wrap up, let's bring in that personal story from the Iowa Chaitanya mission source, the one about Cassia and her involvement with Seth.
Yeah, this is a really powerful illustration, I think, of how these dynamics can play out in someone's life.
The source says that Cassia became increasingly isolated from her family and her friends, and there were changes in her behavior and her appearance, and she seemed to become financially dependent on the group.
It's a classic pattern, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The isolation, the changes, the financial dependence, they're all potential indicators that something isn't right.
And then there's that written statement that was found in her backpack.
Right.
It reads like something straight out of an indoctrination manual.
Yeah, the language is very telling.
Right.
It talks about voluntary involvement and the right to follow one's desires, but there's this underlying sense of obligation there.
Yeah.
And even fear of leaving.
It's like she was trying to convince herself that she was happy and making her own choices, even though the circumstances suggested otherwise.
Yeah, that internal struggle is something that we see time and time again with people who've been deeply involved in groups that exert a high level of control. Right. It can be incredibly difficult to break free from that mindset.
Yeah.
Even when you start to see those harmful aspects.
Yeah, Cassia's story is a stark reminder that these cult dynamics aren't just abstract concepts,
Mm-hmm.
They can have a devastating impact on real lives.
Absolutely. And it underscores why we need to be aware of these warning signs, not just for our own protection, but for the well-being of those around us.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What's the final takeaway for our listeners?
The key takeaway is this, critical thinking, it's an ongoing process, not a destination.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we have to stay vigilant, question assumptions, and be willing to challenge authority.
We can't afford to be passive consumers of information.
Right.
We have to be active, discerning, and seek out those diverse perspectives.
Because ultimately, our freedom, our well-being, and the health of our society, they depend on our ability to think for ourselves.
That's a powerful message to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
And remember, you have the power to make those informed choices
Yeah.
and to protect yourself from harm.